Welcome to the Next Generation Rockstars podcast. If you are trying to figure out how do you recruit and retain this next generation of rockstar talent, well, you are in the right place. Today, I have a great conversation to share with you. I talked to Kayla Woitkowski, who is the head of university recruiting at SAS in North Carolina. And they are a privately owned company, but they are consistently on the Great Place to Work list pretty much every single year. And they're about 40 years old, and they're a software company, and they're doing some really very cool things. But what they're really doing that's really cool is they're using their own social innovation and their own initiatives on Data for Good to help them recruit students at the university level. So listen in and learn a lot from Kayla Woitkowski as she shares with you how she built an entire university recruiting program from scratch. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk to you. Just to give the audience a little context on how I came to be with you today. I was invited as a guest to the Great Places to Work conference of 2019. It was awesome. I sat in on a session led by someone from SAS on social innovation. And he was phenomenal, and he was showing all these wonderful things. And he talked a lot about a program that you guys have called Data for Good, which I'm so looking forward to talking to you about and sharing with everybody because I think it's so but that's how I was kind of put around to you, how I got to you originally. And you and I just had a conversation, and I thought that you had some really interesting things to share with the audience about university recruiting. So Kayla, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share a little bit more about university recruiting. It is in every way, shape, and form my passion. Really, a little bit about me is I actually studied human resources and business administration at North Carolina State University. And back in college, in studying human resources, I found the field to be incredibly broad. There's so much that you can do in human resources, from leadership development to training and development to recruitment, compensation, all the different areas. So back in college, I ended up having quite a few different internships. I was a little crazy and actually had 6 different internships in college. I know, it's a little crazy, but it was really through those various internships that I kind of tested and tried out different areas of HR. And one of my internships back in 2009, which is incredible to think it's been a decade, but I was working at BMW Manufacturing down in South Carolina.
Yes.
And, yeah, right there off of I-95. If you've driven that way, you've probably seen it.
Been there, yes.
At the time I was hired to be kind of more of the training and development intern, but I found that the amount of time I was spending doing my actual work, it wasn't enough to fill my day. So ended up talking to the recruiter that recruited me and said, hey, I have a few extra hours of time. I would love to hear more about this field called university recruiting. So she kind of pulled me over to do some work to help her. And it was in that moment that I found my passion. I think there is nothing more empowering and inspiring than helping students really find and land that very first job out of college. Yes. And really since that point in time, since 2009, I've been now working primarily in the technology field in all aspects of university recruiting. So prior to being at SAS, I was at a company called NetApp. They do data storage, headquartered out in California, and spent some time out in the Silicon Valley doing some university recruiting out there, and now have been at SAS for about 5 years helping to build and grow our university programs here. So that's a little bit just in brief about kind of the professional side of myself. But personally, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and ended up down here in North Carolina for college. I was a first-generation college student. So scholarships brought me down to North Carolina and has allowed me to stay. That's and awesome. More personally, I suppose, expecting my first child in September. So
congratulations.
I suppose the important pieces about myself.
Awesome. Well, interestingly enough to note, and this was not planned by any stretch of the imagination, but you actually know a guest from our first season.
Yeah. So it's one of those kind of multiple lines of connection. Honestly, I would be surprised if she even remembers me, but she did go to high school, the same high school that I did, just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I have an older brother, so she was in the same grade as my older brother, and I believe she was very involved in cheerleading along with some of my girlfriends. So yeah, it's a
Not
small
surprised.
world.
Yes,
Small world.
absolutely. So for those of you who watched and followed along on season 1, that was Ashley Skews. So she was from Beam. She was just a dynamo. So yeah. All right. Okay. So let's get back to SAS though. You guys actually had a very interesting situation come about. Actually, it's not that unique right now in corporate America. I feel like it's something that more companies need to start addressing and talking about. And I think that you guys have done a really great job of addressing it head on. But you guys found yourself in a situation where your workforce was older, a lot older.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and you're exactly right. It's a common problem now, and maybe not a problem, but a business circumstance that's taking
Yes.
place at corporations all across the world, with the baby boomer generation historically having been the largest generation in the workplace, and obviously now approaching retirement age and starting to kind of vacate positions. That it's creating a lot of gaps in skill. It's creating a lot of gaps just in sheer volume of employees at organizations. And although it is something that every organization is facing, to your point, at SAS, it was perpetuated because we are very fortunate to have a corporate culture that has been year over year named as one of the best places to work in the world. We have an incredibly low turnover rate for the technology industry, and for that reason, a lot of people have spent their entire careers here at SAS. And so now we had this circumstance where we were kind of foreseeing that a large population of our workforce is eligible for retirement. And we had this need to really build the next bench of talent that really was going to help take our workforce forward into our next 40 years. We're a 40-year-old software company. So at the time that I joined SAS, actually, I was coming over, as I mentioned, from a company called NetApp. There at NetApp, I was one of 11 doing university recruiting. So we had a pretty built out university recruiting function, and then came to SAS and quickly observed that there wasn't a university recruiting discipline necessarily and team. So I saw this as a fantastic opportunity, and honestly, just the stars aligned that there was a true business need for us to be proactive about identifying and recruiting strategically the next generation of talent for our organization. And that, I just came in with a passion and desire to want to build and grow. So we did. We really took this as an opportunity to build and create a university recruiting team from the ground up. And that was about 4 years ago, back in 2015 now. 4 years ago, actually, that would be 4 years ago, 2015, in this June. So so that's how we address that problem.
Very cool. So tell me about, I assume that when you took this to higher ups and were building this business case, what did that look like? I mean, what were the age ranges that you were facing currently, and what kind of skills did you know that you were going to have massive losses in?
Yeah, really the way that we approached it with leadership is that, one, we already had a fairly substantial intern program that at the time, we weren't capitalizing on the talent. So at that time, we were converting to full-time in about the mid 30% of interns were actually receiving full-time offers. And the industry, really tries to target more closely to 60 to 70% of their interns receiving full-time opportunities. So really started first with, we have a program where we're not seeing the complete return on investment. So if we know this talent is strong, we're getting them over the course of an entire 10 to 12 weeks, why not take this talent, assess their skills, and give them full-time opportunities? You're going to get so much more insight and data on these candidates over the course of an internship than you would potentially during an interview process. So that was kind of piece one, was let's capitalize on this intern program that is already in existence. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it more strategic. Let's make it an experience for these students. And then two, a lot of what we brought to leadership was more so industry benchmarks around what other organizations of our size and in our industry were doing in terms of university recruiting. At that time, given some of the experience out in the Bay Area, there were some contacts that I was fortunate enough to make during that time that were leading university recruiting programs at the likes of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and some other organizations, and they were generous enough. You'll find the university recruiting field is very open and people are willing to give information, and benchmarking with them, finding out that, a company like LinkedIn and Facebook, who has exceptional brand awareness because they're more consumer branded products, they were having university recruiting teams to the size of 35 to 80.
Yes.
That are out there really driving their brands on university campuses and helping to recruit that top talent. So it was really taking that benchmarking market data and saying, here's what our competition for talent is doing. If we're doing nothing, we are not securing our future with top talent. So it was more so around the opportunity that was being lost. Maybe not so much at the time around looking at the workforce demographic in great detail. It was more so we need to be doing more.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. I'm really glad that you saw that opportunity and you seized on it. And especially I know that they are as well, that you saw this hole and seized on it. That was very entrepreneurial of you.
Thank you.
That and to address it. So let me ask you, as you guys have started to change the methodology here and who you're attracting, what changes have you guys had to make internally as well, whether it's through benefits, whether it's through internal coaching, whether it's through whatever? What have been some of the big changes you've had to make culturally as a company?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And one of the major things that we've had to do is I partner very closely with somebody that leads more of the learning and development aspect of human resources. And we've built now very well built out programs that are more for training and enablement. So when these individuals come on board, come day one, we joke and say, you're going to go through an entire additional semester of college, except it's going to be specific to SaaS. So we call these programs our SaaS academies. And depending on the job that the individual is being hired into, this learning and development team has built out fantastic curriculum that kind of takes them through every aspect and competency of the role that they're expected to have in order to be successful day one on the job. So it's a matter of, if we are trying to kind of fill a skill gap that experienced hires are vacating, we can't expect a college student to come out of college and have all the skills to be successful. The universities do a fantastic job building kind of theory and a lot of times a lot of hands-on practice, but it might not be in our technologies. It may not be the way that we sell our products. It may not be the way that we expect to treat our customers. So a lot of that we need to invest. We need to invest in these students and make sure that they're getting all the skills necessary to be successful. So that has been a huge investment of the organization, and has been to create and build out these SaaS Academy programs. We've definitely had to completely flip on the backside the way that we recruit. Our typical traditional recruiting model, at least at the time that the team was being built, I mentioned briefly about SaaS's workplace culture, and we're very fortunate to have kind of a best place to work culture. And for a while there as an organization, we were resting on that to be our form of attracting talent. Right. And here in the local area, that it works exceptionally well. But when we're talking about the top talents across the entire nation, we would show up on university campuses and we'd hear SAS, a semester at sea, or SAS, SAS shoes, SAS airlines. We were getting all sorts of things. People did not know who we were. And when we have a lot of employees that have been here for their entire career and have been here since inception, I think the idea that we needed to brand ourselves as an employer of choice was lost.
Yes.
So completely flip on the backside that we need to sell the candidates. We need to be active and engaged, and we need to be present, and we need to be, investing in our outreach. And so we completely flipped our model. Instead of what you would call traditionally in the recruiting world, maybe a post and pray, where you post a job and pray you get the talent in. Yes. We had to flip our entire processes to be more strategic, to pick schools that made sense for us, to have a plan of how we approach the talent on our campuses, and make sure that we had brand recognition and a brand that made sense for our target population. You know, we have paid for daycare here at SAS. We have so many wonderful benefits. It's not what this generation cares about. But we do have fantastic programs that help with the Young Professional Network to help build a community of these individuals. We have work that is meaningful. So we had to do a lot of work in understanding what is our value proposition and how can we make sure what we're sharing to the candidates aligns with what they're seeking. So while we didn't create these massive benefit shifts and changes in program, what we did is we pulled out the areas of our benefits that made sense for this population, and we made sure that we had the right marketing materials, handouts, campaigns, and luckily we have fantastic partners here within SAS that help us in our HR communications and marketing teams that help us build kind of what is this messaging so that our go-to-market strategy in recruiting these students actually aligns with their desires. And luckily, we had a lot of things in place that do kind of line up with what this generation was seeking.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because this actually segues into your Data for Good initiative that I want to really talk about and talk about as not only a selling point, but obviously it's doing a lot of good around the world. But actually, why don't you take this? Why don't you talk a little bit about that program?
Okay, I will do my best. You heard it from the expert at the conference that you were at, so there's no way I will do it the amount of justice that Issa would. But really, at SAS, we are using our analytics products in ways that are really helping humanity. And we've been doing this since we were founded in 1976. There's nothing new to what we're doing. Our products are being used to, help rescue endangered species and track them and make sure that we can have proactive plans so that endangered species are, being protected. We have different plans all across the country that are helping with human trafficking and tracking the instances and seeing if there's any trends so that we can combat human trafficking in the future. We have different ways that we're helping police forces have the right data in place so that if you end up, arresting somebody or pulling them over on the side of the road, instead of letting them go, connecting databases so that all of the other data sources that could say, no, this person actually needs to be behind bars. So that person actually gets to be behind bars and really helping the safety of our communities. And I say that we've been doing this since 1976 because it really is ingrained in everything that we do. As analytics, data analytics is really the power and the driver of a lot of the change that the world needs to see now and in the future. And all we've done is we've started to tell these stories, and we've started to tell these stories in a more clear, concise, and direct way that we find that we can talk about the ways that we're helping some of the largest banks in the world, fight fraud and look at risk analysis situations. But when we tell those stories, when we tell those stories that really do talk about saving the lives of individuals or helping to make the world a better place, that not only does that help people want to use our products more, but more than anything, when you think about recruiting, that's why I love working here, is I know that the work that I'm doing, I'm hiring individuals that are working on this meaningful work to make the world a better place. It helps everybody see the bigger picture as to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So, this Data for Good initiative, it's a campaign, but it's a campaign to bring together the stories of what we've always been doing and just being a little bit more intentional about telling all of the ways that our products are doing amazing things around the world.
So I will put in the show notes links to some of the videos that are online that are showcasing the Data for Good initiative and some of the work that you guys have been doing. But I will tell you from my own personal experience, this was my first introduction to what you guys are doing. And these videos gave me chill bumps. I mean, whether it was working with the Red Cross during the earthquake in Nepal and how to get resources to help these people and save lives and continue continue to help them move further along down the path that they needed to go so that they could get out of that immediate dangerous situation. It was just you guys pooling together what you already have and just giving it, hey, Red Cross, here you go. Let me do this for you. And I feel like that's really what humanity and corporations should be doing together is just helping people. What can we use what we're already doing to help humanity?
Absolutely. I'd love to tell a quick story that I don't know if Lisa ended up showcasing or not, but this was one of the first exposures to Data for Good that I ended up seeing in working at SAS. And now that I'm expecting my own child, even more just power to the story. But we have a video internally. I'll see if it's external too. If so, I'll send it to you to include in those links. But in short, we actually had an employee who got in front of all of the software developers to tell the story of how she was pregnant with her very first child, and she went for her 20-week ultrasound, which is typically where you find out if it's a girl or if it's a boy. And at that ultrasound, found out that her child had actually had a stroke while she was in gestation. So, you know, you can only imagine all the panic and fear that comes to you as a parent, and thinking, I was just going to find out the gender, and now I have this information that I don't know what to do with. And she goes on to tell this story about how, you know, immediately she started testing and got the results. When she got the results in the form of lab reports, the lab reports were written in SAS programming code. So this was at Baylor Hospital. Baylor is one of the SAS users. And what these results told her was her plan of what she needed to do immediately. And then day one, once the child was born, to ensure that the child was going to be able to take her very first steps. And in the video, she again is on stage in front of all the software developers, and she goes on to then have her daughter walk on stage, and, you know, perfectly happy and healthy. And you know, you watch this, and she's telling the developers that the work that they do matters, and if it wasn't for this work that she was doing, that she doesn't know if her child would have ever been able to take their very first steps. And the only reason I can get through it without tears is because I've seen the video now hundreds of times. But yeah, that's meaningful work. That is working. You know, software developers every day can think that they're just creating a program or that they're just writing some scripts, but the work that they were doing saves this child's future of one of our very own employees. So again, just a matter of finding those stories and telling those stories and making people understand and see the why and the impact has been what has been so fantastic about this whole kind of Data for Good initiative, if you will. It's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even, I think that if everybody could make that tie into what they do, I think that the world would work in a very different way, and the workplace would be a very different place to be. But that is so incredibly touching. I mean, I bet every software developer had a new fire lit after that.
Absolutely. How could you not want to work harder when you know that that is the work that you're contributing to? You know?
And that is just one story of probably millions that they have touched that they're not aware of.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's switch gears before I cry during the interview.
Sorry about that.
No, that was a beautiful story, and thank you so much for sharing it. And that's what we're looking for. All right, but again, no crying today, Amanda. So let's talk a little bit about if a company was looking to start a university recruiting program from scratch. They have nothing, much like what you had. What advice would you give them? And what are some foundational pieces that you think that they need?
Absolutely. And there are some critical components in order to do it right. I would say first, executive buy-in is key. And it really needs to start from the top. And the reason why that's important is, one, you need to think very differently about how you workforce plan in terms of headcount. And this can be very challenging for a lot of corporations. So traditionally for recruitment, you have somebody vacate a role, or you identify a business need kind of point in time, and then you kind of fill that need. Now, some organizations are a little bit more strategic and proactive, but I'll say for probably about 90% of organizations, that's just the reality of how you function. In order to do university recruiting right, you have a window of opportunity, especially if you're recruiting for business talent, if you're recruiting for computer science talent, analytics talent right now where the market is extremely hot and these students have opportunities. A lot of the big four accounting firms, the big banks are really the ones that have moved the needle to a point where students are seeking jobs a lot of times well in advance, at least the semester before they graduate. And that period of time from about September to November prior to graduation, so these are even for those graduating in May, September to November is when students are receiving job offers and when they're accepting job offers. And if you aren't effectively able to plan ahead with your needs and you're not recruiting in that period of time, you are missing out. University recruiting is extremely different in that if you think about it, these students, I think the most recent article I read from USA Today said every computer science student, there's going to be 10 vacant openings for every one computer science student. There's 10 opportunities that are available for them to consider. So how do you make yourself stand out? How are you going to be the 1 in 10 that they select? And especially when you're going up against large consumer brands and not everybody has the brand recognition as some brands that are just kind of in front of students every single day. So if you're not there at the right period of time and you're not there with the right value proposition for students, you're going to miss out. So it takes pre-planning. It takes executive buy-in. It takes working on the headcount planning in advance. It takes being able to make offers in that period of time. And it takes really having a strong employer brand and knowing what is true to you and being able to articulate that to students. So when they are looking at their 10 opportunities in front of them, they genuinely and authentically know what makes your organization unique. And I want to put an emphasis on the word authentically. It's okay if your environment isn't the type that has ping pong tables and pool tables and all of these things that startups are able to offer, some of the large tech employers are able to offer. That's okay. And what you have to offer, you have to think about what makes you authentically unique and different, and then finding the students that truly want what you have to offer. So that's a big piece. Make sure your intern program is solid. I think that is kind of step one. Your intern program is an exceptional way to recruit talent early, keep them engaged, and give them an opportunity to get exposure to your culture, to wow them, to really have programming that makes them say, that was such a great experience that I don't want to consider other employers. And the great thing is you can have interns as early as we hire them in high school. So we start engaging them before they even go to college. Yeah. And we do find that some of our high school interns stay with us from, their senior year of high school through all 4 years of college, and then they come to us full time. And that doesn't even give other employers the opportunity to engage and recruit them. So make sure that intern program is solid. I do want to go back to kind of that outreach component. So how you're actually engaging students on a university campus.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It is so critical. And, one thing that I think is a misconception is we're in this era of digital transformation. I feel like you hear it all the time. How are you online? How are you present online? Social media, this Gen Z is so connected. They're the connected generation. How are you getting in front of them in the ways that they want to? Genuinely, the right way to get in front of students is still very traditional. To be present on a university campus. Nothing goes further than a handshake, to meeting somebody face to face, to providing mentorship opportunities, to really, truly engage students. And you can't do that at 4,500 universities across the United States. I think there's 4,500 degree granting institutions across the United States. So pick which schools make sense for you and then go deep. Be the employer of choice on that campus because you're there multiple times a semester. You're sending alumni, you're sending people that are going to represent your culture well, and give that face-to-face connection. It goes a very long way. So I would say those are kind of the key baseline components to be thinking about is what is your outreach strategy? What is your messaging? How is your intern program being used? And are your executives and is your workforce planning tight to a point that you're going to be able to execute when you're building this plan?
That's really super solid. I mean, I feel like something that someone could easily take and say, okay, we're starting from scratch. We have nothing, but this is something we'd like to tackle. But what I thought was most interesting, and I think that was most people are going to latch onto, is that last piece about the outreach, the in-person, face-to-face. And it is so important. Yes, they're very technologically savvy. Yes, they are in their phones all the time, but face-to-face, human being to human being connection is where it's at. I mean, we are hardwired that way. We crave that in a neurobiological sense. And if you're just depending on students to read about you on your website or check out your social media presence, that's not getting the job done. That's part of it. And they will definitely check that out probably before you come on campus. But if you're not there face to face and like really impacting them in that way, don't waste your time.
Other employers are, and that's what it boils down to. And that's what makes university recruiting so unique, is that these students are looking for a job post-graduation, unless if they're taking a gap year or something to that effect, they're looking for a job. And they have every industry as an option. They have every organization as an option, hundreds and hundreds. If your company doesn't have a very profound and unique employer brands, they're not going and checking your website. You need to be in front of them. So how are you actively engaging? How are you present? How are you in the classroom? How are you at career fairs? How are you doing tech talks? We'll do interesting things, like we'll go into the big open area on a university campus and host a yoga class. And then we'll just have our signage there, and we'll have students doing yoga on behalf of SAS, because, health and well-being is so important to us as an organization. And then that creates buzz.
Of course.
Students in downward dog over there on behalf of SAS. And just, how are you being creative? How are you approaching students in a very different way?
That's excellent. I love that idea. I love that you're reaching out to them in that way. I have one question, and this is more of a clarifying question for our audience, for someone who is looking to start a program from the scratch. You said that September to November is when you're making offers. These are for students graduating in May.
You got it.
What's the start date, projected start date on something like that?
Typically, post-graduation. So it depends if it's a semester schedule or a quarter schedule, but I would say anywhere from May 15th through till June 15th, you'll find is pretty average. I will say I'm noticing a lot of the big four global accounting firms moving to September start dates.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think some of that is, one, to allow students the ability to travel. There is a big desire for that now, and go for it. The world is your oyster. It's the only time you're about to start working for the rest of your life. Might as well take that time. But two, academic calendars vary across the globe. So September is a good midpoint so that you can really get people kind of all graduating at once. So start dates in September, that's fairly normal as well.
Okay, perfect. Now I have a question for you. Doing what I do, I talk a lot to leadership. I talk to recruiting. I talk to basically everybody about millennials and Gen Z and, this, that, and the other. But there is always that whole media buzz around and that discourse around, oh, they're this or they're that. In your opinion, what are the big differences when you saw university recruiting a millennial versus university recruiting a Gen Z? Now, I know we're early in Gen Z, but still, what are you seeing?
It's such a great question. If you don't mind, I want to kind of talk briefly about the first part of the question, just because I'm super passionate about this. So I very genuinely feel that generation is only a small component of what makes somebody who they are. And
please continue.
I took a fantastic training early in my career when I was at NetApp, actually. That was a Generations in the Workplace training. And the entire training, the first half of it was your kind of more stereotypical generations in the workplace. Here's what, millennials do. Here's what baby boomers do. Here's what, Gen X experienced. And this is how it shapes their views in life. And it was, kind of just educational. Now, right before lunch, what they had us do was take a quiz. And it was all these characteristics and factors about who you are, how you prefer to receive communications. It's a lot of good information. After lunch, what they had us do was plot a sticker into different generations with a certain color. The color was what your true generation was. And most people did not put their color in alignment with their true generation. I was a Gen X, even though I am a millennial. And I just think that the year that you were born is only going to determine a small factor. And there's so much more that makes somebody who they are. So, end rants, but that's something that I just feel very, very, very passionately about. So, transitioning into kind of differences in what I've seen, I'll say it is fascinating being on university campuses right now in this era of, podcasts. And what we're doing right now is you walk around and it's almost sheer silence because everybody has their earpods or their AirPods or earphones in, and they're walking around engaging with content 24/7 in everything that they do. And that was not the case, recruiting 10 years ago on university campuses. Students were having conversations, and yes, there was still some texting while walking and things like that, but just the engagement with constantly having inputs. I'm seeing that come through then too once they enter the workforce, and the idea of how to keep somebody engaged in the workplace. And I manage a team of 7, and I think everybody on the team outside of maybe 2 are all either Gen Z or millennial. Right. And I walk into the office, open the door, and I do see they have their earbuds in and multitasking in their work, and it's fascinating. So not to completely contradict what I had said earlier, but there is a little piece that makes employers needing to think a little bit more about their digital strategy. Now, it can't be everything, but I think it needs to be in tandem. What's your on-campus presence? What is your digital strategy? And kind of marrying the two so that you are connecting with those that are always connected. And there's a lot of fascinating tools that are out there in existence now where you can do some of that. I would say also expectations around what they're seeking is way different. I would say Gen Z, the customization era, where they want things to be very specific to what they're seeking. I've never seen students have so much of a plan as they do right now. They know specifically what company they want to work for, what industry, what type of role, because they're trying to customize an experience that is something that they are kind of striving to do. And that makes it more interesting. There's a lot of times where we have to kind of walk students back out of their idea of perfection, walk them back out of, have you thought about something different? Have you thought about, a large organization, even though you want to go to a startup? Have you thought about, the pieces of Silicon Valley, a high cost of living, and helping kind of walk them back through kind of rationalizing through their desires for a job. We spend a lot of time with Gen Z kind of explaining some of those things where I can't say that we didn't have to do that with millennials, but we certainly have to do that a little bit more. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing, but honestly, I don't see wild major differences between the two other than that connectivity. But in short, that meaningful work component was really important for millennials, even more important for Gen Z, and making sure companies are authentic and genuine about their value propositions are two of the big components I'm seeing.
I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, so when you are out there on campuses and you are, recruiting and you're looking at students, how do you identify someone who is a rock star or who has the potential to be a rock star? What shows up for you?
Yeah, this is another thing. Gosh, you're asking all the questions that I just get excited with passion. What we talk about as a team here at SAS is passion, attitude, and aptitude. When we're looking at students, a lot of times managers are saying they need to have this specific skill. They need to be specialized in open source programming. But then you take a step back and you say they're a student. What is going to allow them to succeed? Passion, attitude, and aptitude. So passion. Are they passionate about SAS's mission? Are they passionate about what we do, analytics? Are they passionate about something? You have all experienced those individuals that you meet that you're like, oh, I can't pull anything out of you. What excites you? Where are you passionate? So looking at that passion, the right attitude, willingness to learn, willingness to be coached, really that genuine, innate curiosity where they're asking more questions and listening more than they are wanting to share or tell or say what they know. That is a big piece of it as well. And the attitude, glass half full, can do attitude, taking initiative, all of those pieces all compromise attitude. And then aptitude. Aptitude is, yes, maybe a certain set of skills, but we do look for past performance. We do look at how they performed in college. I do think that if they have been involved in student organizations, they're well-rounded, they're contributing back to their university. That means that they would come to SAS and hopefully want to contribute to our culture and our ecosystem just as much as they are at the university. And aptitude as well is obviously intellectual aptitude. So all of our interviews here at SAS have what we call a role-based activity, where we actually do give them a component of what we'd expect them to do in the job and just see how they do. Instead of just asking behavioral-based questions, how would you do something? Actually making them show that they can. They have the aptitude and ability to do the work. So passion, attitude, aptitude is what we look at.
That's awesome. Okay. So let's talk to our younger audience for just a second. You have a college student, and if you could talk to all the college students in the world today and you would give them some advice about how to find the right fit for them, it may not be SAS, it may be somebody else, but what do they need to be looking at? What do they need to be focusing on to find that right fit?
A couple of things, and that's a daunting thing. It's so daunting. It goes back to every industry, every company culture, every job that's out there. How do you know what's right for you? A couple things. One is know your big three. I had a professor back in college who, when I was looking at different job opportunities, said, Kayla, there are many components of a job. And he actually gave us a list, all the students a list. Who's going to be your manager? Location, pay, benefits, work culture, working hours. There are a lot of aspects of a job. Do an inventory. What are all those various aspects of a job? And then what are your big three? What are the three things that matter most to you? And if you don't know, because maybe you haven't had an internship, or maybe you haven't, had the right conversations just yet, find mentors. Find mentors who are currently in jobs who can tell you, here's how working for a bad manager can impact your every single day. Here's how working for an organization that's very cutthroat or very lenient and relaxed, here's how that could impact how you enjoy your job. Pay, and just work through those and talk to people and figure out what are the three most important criteria. If you want to be super analytical, weight them. Go down the list and actually do a numerical weighting based on what is most important to you, so that when these job opportunities are flying at you and you're trying to evaluate, you have some sort of criteria to make a decision that's more than just a gut feeling, and it's backed by some truth that you have first discovered within yourself, and you've made that realization. Here is what I want in a job. This job matches up, this one doesn't. And then it helps you evaluate a little bit more effectively. But I can't emphasize enough the importance of mentors. It was a mentor that helped me switch my major from accounting to HR. Thank God I married an accountant and I could not do what he does every day. To all you accountants out there, I am very impressed by all that you do. It was a mentor that helped steer me into university recruiting. It was a mentor that brought me over to SAS. And it was a mentor that just recently helped me decide how I'm going to plan and what I'm going to do as I'm having my very first child. So mentors can help you through every aspect of your career, get to know you better than you know yourself, and maybe make some of these decisions a little bit easier for you as well.
Absolutely. Well, I can't think of anything more wonderful to end on than that right there. So, Kayla, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Amanda.
All right, everybody, tune in for next week's episode. We've got another fantastic guest. See you then. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Next Generation Rockstars, where we have discussed all about recruiting and retaining that next generation of talent. So I'm guessing that you probably learned a tremendous amount from this week's Rockstar leader. And if that is the case, don't keep me a secret. Share this episode with the world But really, share it with your friends, with your colleagues, because they also need to learn how to recruit and retain this next generation of talent, because these skills are crucial to business success moving forward. Now, of course, I want you to keep up to date every single week as we are dropping each and every episode. So be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform of your choice, and you will see the next generation rock stars show up just for you.